Tarraco of the early Christians.
For many years now, I have longed to come and meet you, which I will certainly do when I come to Hispania. I therefore hope that I will be able to visit you once there, and that you will help me to get there.
With these words, the Apostle Paul of Tarsus expresses his wish to go to the Iberian Peninsula with the help of Rome's Christian community.
His wish may have come true, and Tarraco may have become the main entrance for Christianity in the Iberian Peninsula.
According to pious tradition, St. Paul preached from the rock on which the 13th century chapel St. Paul of Seminary was built.
But if Paul got to Tarragona, part of his missionary activity must have been developed in the area of Colonial Forum, nerve centre of the city at the time.
The first corroborated trace of Christian community dates back to the middle of the century.
We know that Tarraco's bishop, Fructuosus, and his deacons, Augurius and Eulogius, were condemned to the stake on the 21st of January of the year 259 during the persecution of the Christians ordered by the emperors Valerianus and Gallienus.
These events are related in Passio Fructuosi, a document of Christian heritage where we can find both direct testimony from people who witnessed the martyrdom of those saints from Tarraco,
and a direct consulting of public bylaws by the writer,
plus a recording of supernatural facts which ended up giving form to the narration.
The author of this document is anonymous, and in Passio he is defined as a soldier. However, the term might be interpreted as Christ's soldier.
The narration in Passio could be divided in two phases. The first one, by this soldier, based on the direct testimony of the facts,
and a second one, with additions by a new writer, whose theological education was solid, probably a clergyman, who probably gave its final shape to the text at the end of the 4th century.
Originally, Passio is said to have been written on papyrus or parchment, and a lot of handmade copies circulated amongst a lot of communities so as to pass on the testimony of the saints in the liturgical celebration of their martyrdom.
The fact that Passio was quoted by authors like St. Augustine or Aurelius Clementus Prudentius during the 5th century is proof that those writings had circulated throughout the Roman Empire.
The tale of Passio was conserved and transmitted in codices, some of which made it to our time, and they include a chronology that goes from the 8th century to the 15th.
It is said in Passio Fructuosi that was on Sunday the 16th of January of the year 259, during the Valerianus and Gallienus Empire, Emilianus, the governor of the province called Hispania Citerior, ordered the arrest of the martyrs.
A group of beneficiari, military corps acting as police force to the service of the governor, was in charge of the arrest.
After 6 days in prison, and after having baptized Rugatianus, the catechumen, within the very walls of the prison on Friday the 21st of January, the martyrs were brought in front of Emilianus to be judged.
In a short and inflexible trial, the bishop and his deacons, having reaffirmed their Christian condition, and Fructuosus, having acknowledged his ministry as bishop, were condemned to be burned to death in the amphitheatre of the city on the very same day.
The sentence was an answer to the fact that the martyrs, in accordance to their convictions, refused to obey the imperial precept of worshipping the gods, and particularly the emperor.
This was an act of disobedience against imperial authority and the state, and therefore the clergyman's attitude could be classified as a lèse-majesty crime, high treason against the established power.
On the way to the amphitheatre, the bishop and his deacons received the support and sympathy of Christians and some pagans as well.
The martyrs, before being burnt, gave out signs of extraordinary strength. They maintained their fast, refusing the invitation to drink an analgesic drink, and they prayed for universal church from east to west.
The martyrdom occurred between 10 and 11 o'clock in the morning, and the bodies of the martyrs were exhibited in the pyre of the amphitheatre until nighttime. After that, the remains were collected by the Christian community and transferred discreetly to a cemetery. Archaeological research reached the conclusion that the tomb is on the present Paleochristian necropolis on the Francoulie River.
This rich site was discovered in 1923. The most important scientific contributions belong to the archaeologic priest Joan Serra Vilaró, who excavated the remains between 1926 and 1933.
The zone was transformed into a big sanctuary for the martyrs between the end of the 4th century and the beginning of the 5th. It consisted of
a basilica, now buried in the ground of the old tobacco factory,
a contiguous built-up area which does not exist today and which could have welcomed a baptistery, the bishop's residence and his administration centre, and a centre to welcome pilgrims.
An area used as a cemetery and
a funeral basilica.
The main building of this sanctuary was the Basilica of the Martyrs. Its altar had been erected on the tombstone of the martyrs.
There were 3 naves in the basilica, and underground were to be found a lot of burial sites, designated by mosaics and inscriptions on stone.
The worshippers wanted to be buried close to the martyrs as a sign of communion and wish for salvation.
The crypt of the Archers, with the martyr's tomb at its centre, is next to the church choir. Today, it is the only visible element of this Basilica of the Martyrs. It once was the sacristy of this temple, and some stairs led to a crypt where the privileged were buried.
The cemetery spread by the basilica. It was enclosed, organized along paths and adorned with trees and plants.
In this cemetery, there is documentary evidence of simple graves, such as those made of amphora, tiles and wooden boxes.
Others are refined sarcophagi made in local stone, marble or lead.
There is also evidence of tumulus and mausoleum graves.
This is the case for the Roses crypt. It is the subterranean part of a large cubical structured mausoleum.
Graves with a rich variety of themes from Christian iconography were found in the cemetery as well as inside the basilica.
A good example would be the sarcophagus of a high civil servant called Leocadius, illustrated with scenes of Moses receiving the tables of the law and Isaac's sacrifice.
Amphelios' judgment is decorated with the mystical lamb and a flourished crater which symbolizes Christ as a source of eternal life.
Another famous element is a marble doll on a child grave.
The Paleochristian epigraphic collection that can be found in the area is the most important in Spain.
Through these epigraphs, the Christians would identify their dead with expressions of faith in hope for resurrection.
In the area of the sanctuary, close to the Basilica of the Martyrs, stood a small funerary basilica. It is now located within the Central Park complex. Inside, there is a display of documentary evidence for some 200 tombs.
A headstone was found during archaeological research which reveals the existence of a tomb belonging to a blessed virgin, Tekla, consecrated to Christ, who was of Egyptian origin and who died at the age of 77.
So, in the 5th century, Tarraco had entered a deep process of Christianization.
In the year 380, Emperor Theodosius proclaimed Christianity the official religion in the state of Rome.
5 years later, the bishop of the city, Imerius, received vicarial attributions from Pope Siricius. Tarragona Metropolitan Church was coming into an important phase, presiding over councils and invigorating new life in the church and its territory, and in the province of Tarraco.
The process of Christianization can be seen in new buildings. It is the case for the Roman villa of St. Sayas, 6 kilometers away from Tarraco, on the banks of the Francoli River,
where on ground level, a big circular room covered with a dome displays mosaics on Christian themes. It is one of the most important examples of Spanish Paleochristian art.
It is basically composed of 3 concentric stripes and a medallion at its zenith.
Scenes of deer hunting can be seen on the lowest stripe, and the dominus, the master of the villa, and his guests are also represented.
On the second stripe, some biblical scenes related to salvation, such as the good pastor, the 3 Hebrews in Babylon furnace, Daniel in the lion's den, Jonas thrown to the sea, amongst others.
On the highest stripe, 4 scenes with enthroned characters are alternated with 4 scenes in which the 4 seasons of the year are personified. Only 2 faces are still visible in the central medallion today.
The ownership and the function of the construction remain unknown. Some researchers identify it as a mausoleum, others as a reception room for a villa, others as a building for Christian cult. Finally, it has also been related to General Asterius' headquarters, who established his troops in Tarraco in the year 420.
In any case, the contracting party was an institution or a Christian, rich and famous, who showed interest in displaying an iconographic project with high and subtle theological background.
Meanwhile, the amphitheatre was converted into a sacred place, and there must have been in its arena an altar or some other monument reminiscent of Fructuosus, Augurius and Eulogius' testimonies.
At the end of the 6th century, Tarraco Church replaced the martyrdom reminder by a basilica. It was located in the very place where oral tradition says the torment of the martyrs took place. A cemetery was built all around it.
In the 12th century, a new cross-shaped Romanesque temple was built on the cement of the Visigoth Basilica. The Middle-Age church received the name of Saint Maria of the Miracle, and it stood there until 1915.
The superposition, since the 3rd century, of those churches onto the very space where martyrs had been tortured is an exceptional fact in the Roman world. This puts into light the singularity of the Tarraco amphitheatre in comparison to other amphitheatres in the world.
During the Visigoth era, a new cathedral was also built, as well as a new episcopal complex.
It might have been behind the actual apse of the medieval cathedral in the highest part of the town.
Some researchers insist that the Visigoth cathedral took advantage of the structures of a big Roman construction that was part of the old sacred area for the imperial cult.
There, some Visigoth architectural elements were found along with different late Roman and Visigoth tombstones.
Inside one of those graves was found a 7th century small jar made of bronze used for liturgical purposes.
Bethesda's sarcophagus, going back to the year 400, is mounted on the facade of the cathedral.
It shows different scenes: the healing of a blind man, a bleeding woman, and a paralyzed man at Bethesda's pool, Zacchaeus' conversion, and the triumphant entrance in Jerusalem.
Along with a few other Roman sarcophagi that were found around the cathedral, it could find its origins in the Visigoth cemetery of the cathedral.
The cathedral must have been dedicated to both Jerusalem the Saint and Saint Fructuosus, according to the Liber Orationum Festivus, a liturgical text from Tarragona Church that was in use at the end of the 7th century. This manuscript is today kept in the Chapter House archive in Verona, Italy.
The relics of the saint martyrs, worshipped in the sanctuary of the Paleochristian necropolis, must have been moved and placed in the new Visigoth cathedral.
Fructuosus, Augurius and Eulogius are the most ancient martyrs known in Roman Spain, and therefore an essential source for the study of primitive Christianity.
The majority of their relics were scattered away from Tarragona in the Visigoth era.
In the Renaissance chapel of St. Fructuosus of Tarragona Cathedral, some of these relics are worshipped.
The first Hispanic martyrs, Fructuosus, Augurius and Eulogius, are at the core of the story which turned Tarraco into one of the richest cities in the Iberian Peninsula for its Paleochristian heritage.